Well, welcome back.
Yeah, welcome.
Today
welcome.
is May 4th, and we're still going through the book of Exodus. Right now, we're in chapter 5. So, I hope you're getting some good things out of this, because there's a lot of important things in here. And we're seeing the birth of a nation.
Yeah.
You know, it started many years before when God spoke to Abraham and promised him to make a great nation out of him, promised him the land of Canaan. Said that all this land that, as far as you can see in every direction, this is going to be your land. Well, we've seen Israel grow into a great nation as far as the number of people, as we talked about before. They went into Egypt with less than 200 people probably, and now they're probably numbering over 1 million. So there's a great number of them, but they still have no land of their own. But God hadn't forgotten his promise, and we're going to see God's fulfillment of his promise in this book.
Yeah.
And so, like I say, we're seeing the birth of a nation, which, to me is exciting. When I would like to read about the birth of this nation, the founding fathers, what their thoughts were and what they had to go through and so forth. And here, this is the founding of a nation, the nation of Israel, which it's gone, you might say, gone out of existence for a period of years, but now it's back in existence again. And it's
after several hundred years.
Yes, after hundreds of years, it's come back together again as a nation. And again, it just shows the faithfulness of God to his promises.
Yes.
And
God has been faithful to Israel.
That's true.
All this time.
God made promises to Israel, and they didn't take place overnight. They took a while.
Yeah.
But God's made promises to us too.
Yeah.
And just as we see that he kept all those promises to the Israelites, God's going to keep all his promises to us.
Yes.
And so that can encourage us. So we left off chapter 4. Of course, if you remember, Moses made all kinds of excuses why he wasn't the one to go and tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go, but God convinced him that he was, and I think he went a little bit reluctantly, but he went anyway. He sent Aaron, his brother, to meet with him so that he could basically, Aaron was going to be the mouthpiece, because Moses said he didn't speak very well. Like I say, some Bible scholars think that he may have stuttered. We don't know for sure, but all we know is he didn't think he was very good at speaking, so God sent Aaron, his Moses' brother, to be his spokesman, you might say. And so if we start off in chapter 5 with Moses going to Pharaoh, Moses and Aaron. So let me just read those first few verses in chapter 5.
Okay.
That says, afterward, now this is after Aaron and Moses met with the elders of Israel, and they performed these signs. If you remember the signs that God gave him to show that God was with him, and that was when he threw his staff down, it became a serpent, and picked it back up, became a staff again, put his hand in his cloak, it became leprous, put it back in, it became restored to normal again, and then poured water out of a vessel and it turned into blood. And he had done this for the elders, and they were all excited. And God's heard us. God sent us a man to deliver us. And so they go before Pharaoh. And again, let's go back to read those first few verses. Afterwards, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go so they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." And then they said, this is Moses and Aaron, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword." But the king of Egypt said, "Moses and Aaron, Why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work. Then Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you're stopping them from working. Moses saying, or not Moses, Pharaoh saying, you guys are just causing trouble. First of all, I don't know this God you're talking about. The Egyptians had all kinds of gods. They worshipped a lot of different things. And this God that they're talking about, that Moses and Aaron talking about, we don't even know him. Why should we listen to him when we've got all kinds of gods? And he says, basically, you're just trying to stir up trouble. You're just lazy. In fact, he goes on in verse 6, he says, that same day Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and overseers in charge of the people. Mm-hmm. You're no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They're lazy. That's why they're crying out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for the people so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies. So basically he's saying, the only reason you guys want to do this is because you're just lazy. And it has nothing to do with worshiping God. You're just lazy, just looking for an excuse not to work. Well, that really is kind of hard to put a understanding to, because they were very hard work. In fact, they were forced to work hard. But as far as Pharaoh saw, the way he saw it, they just were looking for an excuse to get out of work. So,
what does he do?
Let's make them work harder.
Yeah.
Before we've supplied the Egyptians apparently supplied the straw, because they had to mix straw in with the bricks. I don't understand all about brick making, but apparently the straw is kind of the whole things together. They had to mix straw in with it. Well, now that you guys got so much time on your hands and you're able to have time to go out and make a sacrifice to God, well, you got time to go get your own straw. We're not going to furnish you any straw, but you still have to make the same number of bricks. Well, they were probably pushing them to their limit as it was, but now part of the people that have been making bricks, they're going to have to go out and find straw. So you got the requirement of the same number of bricks to be made, but less people working at making bricks, because like I say, you got some going out and getting straw. And of course that made it very difficult for them to be able to meet their quota. Mm-hmm. But it's not much different today. People today, a lot of people in authority, they don't recognize the power and authority of God, just like Pharaoh didn't. Yeah. And they think people that want to take time off to worship God, people that want to have Sundays off, why, they're just looking for an excuse to get out of work. Prayer is just a cop out for not working everything out yourself. Why do you have to pray when you should just be working harder and work it out yourself? That's the attitude of people that don't know God. They look at spending time worshiping God, spending time praying just as a waste of time. But really, that's the most valuable time. That's the most productive time we can spend, is spending time with God, spending time praying and asking God for direction and asking God for his help. But again, Pharaoh didn't recognize that, so he just made them work all that much harder. Yeah. And so the words passed on. It seemed like they had a kind of you might say, a pecking order there. Apparently there were Egyptian overseers that was kind of in charge of all the brick making, but then they had Hebrew overseers that also was working underneath the Egyptians, and then under them, of course, was the laborers that were doing all the work. And so when the quotas aren't met, first of all, the Egyptian overseers are going to get some flack because they're not meeting the quota. So what are they going to do? They're going to start punishing the Hebrew overseers. And they got nothing, no recourse other than just to punish the laborers, punish the people that are working. And of course, that just really makes them very unpopular with the other Hebrews, because they're probably, these Hebrew overseers, probably not very popular anyway. They're probably looked at as collaborators, although they probably don't have much choice in their position. They've been forced to be in those positions, and they get punished if the quotas aren't met. So what do? Like I say, they push the laborers harder. And probably they were looked upon kind of like the tax collectors in Jesus' day, the Jewish men and women that were, well, I'm sure it's probably just men. I don't think they had women tax collectors. But anyway, the men that were collecting taxes in Jesus' day, they were, many of them Jewish, but they were collecting taxes for Rome. Well, in this case, these overseers, they're, the Hebrew overseers anyway, they're pushing the laborers to work harder, and they're seen as being collaborating with the Egyptians. And so they're probably, like I say, they're not very popular. And of course, with all this going on, with getting all kinds of punishment for not meeting the quota, they go to, first of all, they go to Pharaoh. And verse, where we at here? Verse 15 says, then the Israelite overseers went and appealed to Pharaoh. Why have you treated your servants this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet we're told, make bricks. Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is with your own people. But they're saying, look, we're doing our best, but we're not, your people are not furnishing straw anymore, and we just can't make all these same number of bricks. Of course, Pharaoh he doesn't listen to them. In fact, Pharaoh says, lazy. That's what you are, lazy. That's why you keep saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get back to work. You'll not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota. So Pharaoh doesn't listen to him, and he's got his heart hardened. Probably he thinks that's the best way to keep things quiet, keep from any rebellion happening. Just work them to death.
Work them to death. Yeah.
Which to me seemed like just the opposite. Seemed like that would stir up more rebellion against Egypt, rather than saying, okay, we'll lighten your load somewhat. As I was thinking about that, I was thinking about what Solomon's son, Rehoboam, if you remember, after Solomon died, and some of the men approached Rehoboam, Solomon's son, who had taken over as king, and he said, they said, listen, if you lighten the load on the people, your father was pretty rough on the people, making them work hard and heavy taxes and so forth. If you kind of lighten the load, the people will love you and they'll serve you. And so Rehoboam listened to, or talked to his advisors. He talked to the older advisors, and they said, yeah, that's what you ought to do. You need to lighten the load, and the people love you. And then he talked to some young advisors, and what was their advice? Man, crack the whip on them, just really be harder on them, really put the pressure on them, increase taxes, make them work harder, and they'll love you. Not that they'll love you, but they'll, that way you can keep them under control. Well, wound up, he lost most of the kingdom. There was a division of the kingdom. Well, this Pharaoh's kind of the same way. Just work them harder. And so they realize they got trouble now. Verse 19 says, the Israelite overseers realized they were in trouble when they were told, you're not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day. And when they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, may the Lord look on you and judge you. You've made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials, and to put a sword in their hand to kill us. So first of all, they go to Pharaoh and complain. When Pharaoh won't listen, well, then they go to Moses and Aaron. You're just making things worse. It was bad enough before you came. Then you came along, and now we're really in trouble. Now we got to work even harder. And their enthusiasm, like I said at the end of chapter 4, they were enthusiastic when Moses showed them these signs, and they realized that God had listened to their cries. But now things are, instead of getting better, getting worse.
Yep, things are heating up.
And sometimes that happens. I've had it happen in my life. I'm sure we all have, that we pray about a situation that maybe is not good. Maybe it's a financial situation, a physical situation. And we pray, and sometimes, especially as we mature in the Lord, instead of getting better, it seems for a while like things get worse. And to me, that's just a test that God puts us through. Are you going to continue to trust God if we don't see the results right away? Are you going to continue to trust in Him when things maybe get worse for a while? When things look like they're getting worse instead of getting better, are you still going to trust in God? Are you still going to believe His Word? And so often, and we'll see this all through the book of Exodus, as the Israelites finally get out of Egypt. Every time they run into a problem, instead of looking back and saying, okay, God made us this promise, and God's done this in the past, and He's going to watch over us now. It's always, God, you've deserted us. God, Moses, why have you done this to us? And it starts right here. Moses, why did you stay out there herding those sheep? Because you just made things worse for us. You made big trouble. Now they're trying to work us to death. Well, Moses kind of passes the buck, They come to Moses and complain to him. So what does Moses do? He goes and complains to God. Verse 22, Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Why, Lord? Why have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me?" God already told him why He sent him. Sent him to deliver him. But Moses is already beginning to doubt it. Did you just send me here to stir up trouble and make things worse for the people? It says, ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he's brought trouble on your people, and you've not rescued your people at all. Again, it's putting the blame on God. How quick are we to sometimes put the blame on God? God, you told me to do this, and look what happened. It's just gotten worse. But again, go back to what God said. God told Moses, I'm going to send you. And He told him too. He said, Pharaoh's not going to listen to you at first. He's going to harden his heart. In fact, I'm going to make his heart even harder, and he's going to resist you. But I am going to deliver you. Yeah. And I know it's hard when you're going through difficult times, and when it seems like things get worse. Sometimes it's a struggle to continue to believe in God, but we got to go back to what God said. I don't even remember where I heard this, but I remember years ago hearing somebody say, don't doubt in the dark what you heard God say in the light. When things were going good and you heard God speak to you and speak to your heart, don't forget that. Don't let go of that if things get a little dark and things don't look so good. And again, these people, including Moses, kind of forgot what God said. God said, this is the reason I'm sending you, to deliver these people. But now he's beginning to question that, because instead of getting better, it's getting worse. Getting worse.
Now say that again, that you quoted.
Don't doubt in the dark what you heard in the light. In other words, when things are going good and God speaks to you, don't start doubting it when things don't look so good.
Yeah. Don't doubt in the dark what you heard in the light.
Going back again to Joseph. God gave Joseph a dream of his family bowing down before him. Then he went through some dark times, through slavery and through imprisonment. but I believe he held on to that vision. I'm sure he had his struggles at times too, but he held on to that vision, and eventually it came true. It took quite a few years, 13, 14 years, but it all came true. And God's going to fulfill this word too.
You notice that not too many times in the Old Testament did God do things instantly.
That's true.
There was a time of waiting.
There's a time of waiting, and God does the same thing today. He makes us wait a lot of times.
Yeah.
That's how we grow in patience. In Hebrews says it's through faith and patience that we inherit the promises. Yeah. You know, the faith part's hard enough, but I think the patience part's even harder. God, I want my whatever I want, and I want it now. Yeah. Like the TV commercials. It's my money and I want it now. It's my miracle and I want it now. But sometimes God makes us wait. In fact, quite often he makes us wait. Sometimes, you know, as baby Christians, he may answer our prayers quickly, you know, just like, you know, as when you have a baby, why usually you respond quickly to it. When he starts crying, you immediately give it a bottle or change it, you know. But as they get older, and they start crying, you know, I'm hungry. Just hold your horse, you know, wait a bit. You'll get dinner. And it's just as in the natural, when we mature, we learn to wait and be patient. In the spirit, we have to learn to be patient and not expect everything to happen overnight. And it's during those times, actually, that if we could keep trusting in God, that our faith grows, that it gets stronger as we see. You know, even though it's been a period of time, that God still is working, and God's arranging circumstances to where it's all going to come out the way he says. Yeah. And you see right here, things for a period of time get worse, but God's got a plan.
Yes, he does.
God's got a plan. And he goes on here in chapter 6 and lets him know that. God speaks to Moses after Moses has been complaining. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, now you'll see what I'll do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he'll drive them out of his country." He's not just going to let them go. He's going to drive them out. He's going to say, "Get out of here. I don't want nothing to do with you anymore. I'm fed up with you Hebrews. Let's get out of here." But again, God is reassuring him. Look, here's what I told you. I said I'm going to deliver him. I'm going to do that. And he goes on, verse 3 or 2. He says, "I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name the Lord I did not make myself fully known to them." God reveals himself over a period of time. In the Old Testament, he revealed himself over a period of time under different names as he showed what he could do. And to me, this is where he's talking about, I didn't make myself fully known to them by my name, the Lord. It's like he's saying, I showed myself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as a covenant maker, as a promise giver. He said, but I'm going to show you as a promise. I'm going to show myself to you as a promise deliverer, as a promise performer, because they didn't see the promise. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, none of them saw the promise. What was the promise? To make them a great nation and to give them the land of the Canaanites. Well, none of those three men saw that. They died before any of this came to place. Even when Jacob died, why, they were still just a few hundred people. But God now is revealing himself to Moses and the rest of the Hebrews as a promise keeper, as a promise fulfiller. I'm going to fulfill the promise that I made. But I'm not through yet. Just because things are getting worse, that doesn't mean I'm finished. Verse 4, I also established my covenant with them. Speaking about, again, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they resided as foreigners. Now I've heard the groanings of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I've remembered that covenant. I remember what I promised to those men.
Yeah.
And therefore, here's what I want you to say, Moses. Here's what I want you to say to the Israelites. I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I'm a covenant-keeping God. I'm a promise-keeping God. I will bring you out from the yoke. I will deliver you from the power of sin.
Mm-hmm.
I will make you a holy nation. I will set you on high.
That's right.
He's made all these promises, and he will keep them. I'll redeem you with an outstretched hand, with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people. And I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I'll bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. He emphasizes it over and over again. I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I made this promise to them to not only make them a great nation, but give them this land. And this time, it's time to fulfill that. So get up, Moses, and go back and tell the Israelites.
Get up and go.
I am going to do what I promised. I will free you. I will redeem you. And that's what we're telling you today. God will redeem you from the power of sin. God will set you free.
Yes.
God will set you on high. He will make you the head and not the tail. We can go on and on. All the promises that God has made, he will fulfill them. He will send Jesus back again.
Yes.
Even though that promise was made several thousand years ago, it's still valid. It's still a promise. It's a promise of God, and he is going to fulfill that promise.
Yes, he is.
And we need to hold on to that. Don't get discouraged because things aren't happening as fast as you'd like them to. You know, I'm just like everybody else. I'd like things to happen quick, you know. When God says something, I want to see it happen today, but it doesn't always happen that way.
No.
So I just have to be patient and continue to trust. That's right. It's coming. It's coming. So, he says, verse 9, Moses reported this to the Israelites. He went back and told them, but they didn't listen to him because of their discouragement and harsh labor. They were going through all the difficult times, and sometimes it is hard to hear God when you're going through a difficult time. But we gotta listen to what he says. You know, I know it's not easy. Like I say, when we're going through difficult times, it was hard for the Israelites because they're being pushed, they're being punished, probably being beaten because they're not being able to make enough bricks, and it's hard, I know, to continue to believe in God when those guys, you're under that kind of pressure, under those kind of conditions. You know, maybe you're working in a job and there's a lot of pressure on you to get things done by a certain time, and you just don't see any way you can get it done, and it just, time's getting closer, deadline's getting closer, nothing's happening. And like I say, I know it's easy to get discouraged and think, God, where are you? But God's there.
He's there.
God's there, and he's promised he'll see us through. So God speaks to Moses again, says, go back and tell Pharaoh again to let the Israelites go. And Moses says to the Lord, if the Israelites won't listen to me, why would Pharaoh listen to me, since I speak with faltering lips? He goes back again to his excuse. I don't speak very good, and these Israelites, the people you promised to let go, they're not listening to me. They're not paying any attention, so why would Pharaoh listen to me? it's a struggle sometimes to do all the things God tells you to do when we don't see uh, the results we'd like to see. But we got to depend upon God.
Yes.
And we don't make excuses for our weakness. Again, Moses talks about his lack of being able to speak good. He falls back on his weaknesses, his lack of speaking ability. But what did Paul tell us about our weaknesses? He said, this is out of, I forgot to write down the reference here, but anyway, these are the words of Paul. He said to me, God spoke to Paul, and he said, my grace is sufficient for you. This is when Paul was asking God to relieve him from the thorn in his flesh. And he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. So, the fact that we're weak doesn't stop God from working. In fact, He works better when we realize our weaknesses. It's when we think, oh, I got this made. I've got this all under control. I don't even need to pray about this. I can handle this. Those are usually the times we get into problems. But when we realize that we really don't have the power to do what God wants us to do in our own strength, that we need God, and say, God, I'm weak in faith, I'm weak in knowledge, I'm weak in wisdom, I'm weak in whatever it is, but Lord, I know that you'll give me the power, you will give me the wisdom, you'll give me the words, you'll help me to do whatever I need to do. That's the time that we can accomplish those things. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ. Doesn't say I can do all things in my own strength. It says I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's depending upon Him. And the more, how do I say it, the greater the difficulty of the task, the more we have to depend upon God. And Moses certainly had a tremendous task laid before him. There's no doubt about that. This was a tremendous task that God had laid out before Moses to get his people delivered from Pharaoh. But God has promised him. He made his promise all through here and repeats it several times that He is going to deliver them. And so he goes back and again speaks to Pharaoh. And then in verse 14 we get jumps into a short genealogy. In fact, it only talks about Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, the first three sons of Jacob. And I believe the main reason this is put in there is it emphasizes mostly the lineage of Abraham, Moses and Aaron, that they are children of, or offspring, descendants of Levi, which of course was appointed later on as the priestly tribe, and so it's basically to authenticate their position. And it says in verse 26, after going through this genealogy, it says, it was this Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said. So it was specifically to let everybody know which Aaron and which Moses, because there were probably other Aarons and other Moseses probably several throughout the generations of Israel. But it was this one, these descendants of Levi, that the Lord spoke to and said, bring the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions. They were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. The same Moses and Aaron. So they want to make sure you know which one it is. And the last two verses, last three verses, we'll just read of that chapter 6, and we'll end there. It says, now when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, He said to him, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I tell you. But Moses said to the Lord, since I speak with faltering lips, why would Pharaoh listen to me? He keeps playing that same tune, yes. Why would he listen to me? I don't speak very good. I'm not a great orator. How can I make my case when I have difficulty speaking? But again, it's not Moses that's going to deliver him. It's God. And that's when we get to that place of realizing I can't save anybody. I can't change anybody's life. All I can do is do what God tells me to do and point people to Jesus. Point people to put their trust in God. Yeah. And that's when we come to that place of realizing really we can't do a whole lot other than we just do what God tells us to do. It's God that does the work. Moses could never deliver these people from Pharaoh. There's no way he could do it, but God could. And of course God did, as we're going to see. But it's coming to that place of realizing it's God working through us. It's not us doing the work, God telling us to do it, and then us just going and doing it on our own. But it's God telling us what to do, and then going with us to help us do it, and seeing that it's fulfilled. And God may have made you some promises that you're still waiting for, but don't get discouraged. Don't get discouraged. God is not a man that he should lie. So if he's made you a promise, you just hang on to that promise and you will see the fulfillment of it. Right. And we're going to see the fulfillment of this promise that God's been making to Moses about the deliverance of the Israelites.
You know, God made lots of promises in the Bible. To Moses, to Israel, and to God's people all through the generations. And even today, God makes promise to us. First, he promises that he'll save us. Mm-hmm. He sent Jesus to fulfill the promise to us that we will be saved. He'll make a way for us to be saved. And that's through his son Jesus. So,
so we just keep trusting in him.
Yeah.
And not waver, because
that's right.
We don't see things happen the way we'd like to as soon as we'd like to.
That's right. And John 3:16 says, for
whosoever.
It was right on the tip of my tongue.
God sent his only begotten Son,
that whosoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. That's right.
In this book that we're studying, God is establishing a nation, a lineage of people to bring the Messiah through. Today, God's establishing a different type of nation. It's not a nation that's defined by a geographical boundary, but it's a nation that's based on belonging to the family, having a relationship with God. And that's possible in whatever nation, whatever physical nation you belong to, whether it's on this continent or some other continent. God is building a holy nation. Yeah. A royal priesthood.
That's what he calls us.
That's right.
You are a royal
priesthood. A chosen people. You're a chosen people.
Nation. That's right.
And so there's
we should show forth
hope
the praises
for
of
every
God.
one of us. Mm-hmm. It says, whosoever believes in him.
That's right.
And you're a whosoever.
That's right.
All you got to do is believe in him and trust his word. And
he'll bring it to pass.
He will bring it to pass.
Yes.
Amen. All right. Well, you have a good week. We will continue next week in chapter 7, and we'll see, going to start seeing some of the plagues that came upon Egypt and how God finally was able to deliver Israel out of Egypt. Yeah. But not only Pharaoh would let them go, but he basically drove them out, said, get out of here. So anyway, be blessed, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Bye.